So I'll get started.
All right.
Great. My name is Dipeshwar Singh. Along with me, I have Oana, who is the originator of the idea, Adesji, Afan, Harry, Janie, Jerry, Nash, and Oshan. Today, we're presenting on the needs analysis tool for remote communities. Indigenous remote communities in Canada face significant challenges in terms of access to basic needs such as food security, healthcare, education, and housing. The challenge posed here is to provide the same standard of living to remote communities as available to the rest of Canada. With the development of a needs analysis tool, we can gather data and identify the specific challenges and lack of resources in these communities. Now, to share the vision, I'll let Oana go ahead.
Thanks. So remote Indigenous communities are heterogeneous. No two are the same. There's a high degree of variability across key socioeconomic, demographic, political, cultural, and geographic factors. Government programming serving these communities is siloed. 200 some communities are identified in NRCan's Remote Communities Energy Database. There are 122 communities served by Nutrition North Canada. There are 150 Canada Post air stage offices, and Transport Canada has identified 182 communities as remote. So as you can see, there's different definitions and inclusion criteria, but there's significant overlap across the various lists of remote communities, and the policy issues are interdependent. The proposed index could harmonize and broaden the understanding of the unique needs of remote communities across government programming to support transparent, equitable, and impactful funding allocations. A preliminary needs index was developed to inform the allocation model for the Budget 2021 investment in the Nutrition North Canada program and served as the inspiration for the data challenge pitch. The preliminary needs index included variables for purchasing power, cost of living, remoteness, infrastructure, and governance capacity or the ability to absorb funding. Future iterations of a remote communities needs index for broader application across government could include additional variables. There's also an opportunity to improve upon the index in key areas such as data sources and how data gaps are addressed, index methodology, what variables are included, how are they weighed, and presentation or visualization, because not everybody's going to wade through massive spreadsheets. Next steps include stakeholder engagement to refine index variables, working with Statistics Canada and others to address data gaps, and implementing the online data visualization tool. Stakeholder engagement will be critical both to inform the development of the index and to create buy-in for the end product. We have identified 3 key stakeholder groups: policymakers and program managers who make recommendations about program and policy development and funding allocations, remote communities, and this includes community members, tribal councils, self-government, and land claim organizations, as well as other representative organizations that access funding and advocate on behalf of remote communities. And finally, Canadians at large. This is taxpayers and their elected representatives who want to know how federal funding is allocated, and researchers who want to evaluate government investments. The key challenges include data availability and quality, especially in communities with a small population, community mistrust and barriers to engagement, and lack of buy-in across government. Key benefits or anticipated outcomes include improving the evidence base to deliver on the Government of Canada's commitment to reduce gaps and improve the quality of life for First Nations, Inuit, and Métis in remote communities, increasing public awareness of the unique needs and challenges of remote communities, and demonstrating the usefulness of complete and accurate data, which could incentivize increased participation and trust in surveys in remote communities, and better resourcing for data collection in remote communities. There will be a modest initial development cost, but we anticipate that the benefits will accrue over time. So I will pass it over to Harry, who will demo the proof of concept.
Great, thank you. So in terms of data and the end product itself, some indicators for the index have been thought through and the sources for them have been explored. The exact list of indicators will be decided with the data and statistical experts in a collaborative manner. And although there are several more indicators that we would like to incorporate throughout the process, with some of the indicators that we've explored, such as the remoteness index, infrastructure index, purchasing power, and so on, we were able to produce a mapping dashboard as our sample product. So With that, I'll briefly share the sample product through the demo. Hello, so this is a quick sample product that the team came up with using Power BI with the preliminary data developed by the program. The dashboard allows the users to obtain the community level of index details as the users hover over to certain areas. Once our indicators for the main indexes are decided, we can display those results in this tooltip that you see here. Users can also focus on certain communities using the filters on the right side of the page, like so, and they would eventually be able to focus on those areas that are considered as high needs using the buttons above, and also be able to see and locate those communities that require the most attention in the visualization below here. Something else that's within our abilities for us to drill through focusing on the selection you have chosen so that the data table populates based on the selections the users make. This provides room for our product to be exported as data, and this could mean that our product could take a step forward as an interactive but also a transparent tool. So I hope you enjoyed the demo. And with that, I'll pass the floor back to Dipesh. Thank you.
Thank you. So in terms of technology, Power BI is the software primarily that we'll be using to develop and support our needs analysis tool. Using Power BI's published web feature, interactive Power BI content can be easily embedded in websites. This allows a user to open a website, find a visual and interactive interface, exactly as demonstrated by Harry. In the screenshot on the current slide, you can see PACT, which is a international nonprofit that serves human development solutions in over 40 countries, and they use this technology very well, almost as a gold standard. Power BI is an industry leader in data visualization because of the way it uses cloud technology, automation, and seamless integration with pre-existing software and infrastructure, like M365 and Azure. We did consider alternative software solutions to implement this, such as Tableau, and possibly even building the application from the ground up the traditional way, but none of them would deliver the end product in a more cost-effective and robust way like Power BI can. We feel that the solution is innovative and well in line with the goals of public service modernization, transparency, and the ethical use of data. Now, moving on to the cost analysis, I'll pass this on to Afan. Thank you.
Thanks, Dipesh. We have estimated that the development of the needs index will initially require one Government of Canada employee, an EC4 economic analyst. The estimated cost recovery for the EC4 analyst was provided by StatsCan. This figure is calculated using an internal spreadsheet, which we do not have immediate access to yet due to confidentiality reasons, as the dataset contains personal identity information of the remote Indigenous population. The recovery cost is significantly higher than the current salary of an EC4, as it includes the estimated overhead expense for StatsCan. Since StatsCan would be providing a service for this project, the recovery cost would also include the cost of maintaining the statistical infrastructure, i.e. the methodologies and the registries which are used. The recovery costs are estimated from the start to publication, considering a minimum of 3 months for something rather simple and straightforward to update after it is fully developed. As such, we have estimated this to be our cost for the second year after deployment. For the first year, or period 0, the analyst would be required for the entire year to conduct a statistical and economic analysis required to create a replicable and scalable index that could be used by the various Government of Canada departments that serve the Indigenous population. After year 2, we only require the EC4 analyst for ongoing work that would be directly related to the statistical and economic analysis required to update any methodologies, registries, or indicators that are used to compute the needs index. As such, our total estimated development cost for the needs index is currently $208,934. And I'll pass it back to Dipesh for a quick summary wrap up of our presentation.
Thank you. In summary, our tool can be used to inform policy and resource allocation in a way where public service agents can be very efficient and effective in their delivery. Using technology, the tool is scalable, easy to deliver, and cost effective, and we're confident in its long-term value. So now I'll open this up to any questions. Thank you.
Thanks very much. start at this end of the table, or?
I can start. Yes. Bonjour, merci beaucoup pour la présentation. That was a very interesting presentation, and I think that there are some application of that index that could be interesting in several departments that are delivering program and services to those communities. I do have some clarification question around your cost. I think you set up front in the presentation consultation and engagement and barrier, and I was wondering, those doesn't seem to be reflected in your cost or in the way you're looking forward to it. So I think I think those were great barriers. I'm just curious to see how the team sees tackling those barriers going forward.
I guess I can speak to that. It's something that we discussed. We just didn't have specific figures to add in to a budget for a clear idea of what the cost to consult would be, because it depends if you're doing in person, if you're doing virtual. So that's a very valid point, and we recognize that there is both a human resources and a financial cost to consultation is important.
Thank you.
Again, thank you very much for a really interesting thing. What I really like about this, I think this is a really important idea, okay, especially for the remote communities. So I have, I guess that's a comment or a question, or maybe two questions. First of all, I've got, your technology I think is great. Okay, you know, Tableau, Power BI, whatever, you know, whatever we use cost-wise, I think that's the right tool. Okay, I'm not concerned about that. I have some questions about the data. Okay, in particular, I'm wondering about the granularity of the data. You know, a lot of what we do, especially up north, data is not that granular. So we really want to go down to the local regions. I'm wondering, do we have that data? Now, I should probably know, being from StackN, but I can't say for sure. Okay, census, obviously. So that was my first, it's a comment, like if you want to respond, that's fine. If you don't have a response, that's fine as well. The other thing too is more a little bit about comms and everything. So what I'm wondering, or what I'm worried, or the index, you can come up with any index, you can come up with an index. And no matter what index you come up, some communities are going to do worse than others. Okay? So how do we manage that comms, that, you know, we're not trying to come up with an index that favors one community or another? And I'm not sure if you have an answer for that neither. You gave some details about the index. There is the quality of life index framework that we have at Statistics Canada. I don't know if you looked at it. I don't know if it's something that might fit, given that this is remote communities and stuff. But I'm just, you know, what I really like to see is that somehow nobody accuses you guys of coming up with an index that's going to favor a particular area of Canada, region, community, or whatever. Because no matter what you do, there's always that risk. So again, I don't want to dissuade you. I just I think it's something you might want to get in front of before you go too far down the road. So anyway, again, really interesting. Thank you.
And thank you. To speak just to the data and the comp side of things, I think the vision we have shared all together within our team is that we want to offer transparency of this data. So we are going to make this data model available on a website. The Power BI model will be available, and so will our methodology. We will be using existing data from data sets done by Statistics Canada and other branches of government that are already in use. In the sense, the message we want to deliver is that this data is dynamic. We want to offer resources to all communities to bring them to the golden standard of living of Canada. So our communications, the direction we'll go in will always be that we want to offer a fair solution with transparency and sure methodology. Oana?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it's a very valid point. There are absolutely data gaps, even in the census data. And I think part of the idea with the index is showing the value of having complete data, the value to communities and participating, and the value to government and putting in the extra resources to make sure that all those communities are properly surveyed. But all of this is secondary analysis of data that's collected by somebody else. And so I think that primary data collection definitely needs to improve, and that will improve the value of the index, and it'll improve the value of other things that are based on that data. In terms of the communication aspect, as Dipesh mentioned, I think the main goal is really transparency in how funding decisions are made. And if communities or the representative organizations are included in the methodology, and I know I'm not going to throw out, hey, come talk about methodology, but like if they're included in the process to decide how this index is created, then they and how what data is chosen, and they see how it's being used, then I think that will potentially mitigate some of those risks.
So yeah, I've got a few questions, and so maybe I'll enunciate my questions and then turn it over. My name is Jason Reed, by the way. I'm the CIO at Natural Resources Canada. And so, first and foremost, a comment. This is, such a very important topic that you're raising. So thank you for being brave and bringing it forward. There's potential here for this to be politically charged. And so coming back with regards to the question around communications, I think engagement with central agencies would be important, just to make sure that they're aware of what's going on. We never like to surprise our colleagues in central agencies. The second sort of question I have is with regards to engagement of Indigenous communities and what their thoughts are with this. Going through different territories and First Nations, you may find some to be very supportive and others not, and so just curious to see what your approach would be there. The third point was with regards to GBA Plus and the impact of these metrics on our female First Nations people. Any thought given there? And maybe the final question that I had on this one, maybe I'll stop there. That's a lot, and I'll provide some space to others.
Thanks.
Yeah.
You want to do all the talking?
So I think for the engagement piece, we would definitely leverage the existing Government of Canada departments that deal with the Indigenous population, as they would already have stakeholder engagements, seminars and other events that we could leverage to do an education piece as well, related to the kind of the data literacy, so the population they could understand what the actual indicators mean behind the data that's being used, and there could be different indicators that are used for different regions, due to their remoteness, due to the climate they're in. So I think that would be very important to get down to the region level in that regards, and for us to to collect good data, because it's remote community, it's going to be very hard to speak to people, and they might not be as open to speak to the government. So that's definitely a challenge that we'd have to overcome.
I think for the engagement piece, you would work with existing relationships. So those various programs that I mentioned that are working with remote communities, each one of those programs, the staff have relationships with people in the communities that they serve. And so you would do your engagement through that, through those existing relationships. In terms of GBA Plus, again, it depends on what variables you include in the index. The census data has, for example, income data for economic families that based on 2 parents with children, two adults with children or extended family, single parent homes, individuals. So there's, you can get at that type of, you can apply the GBA Plus lens in the index if you want to include those additional variables, or have you can toggle things on and off if that's what you are interested in.
And so is there risk of deaggregation of data? Some of these communities are quite small, and so by surfacing some of these metrics, would you be then able to target the individuals within that within that community?
I believe that we would not be able to do that because of the Statistics Act, because we wouldn't we wouldn't have access to that data. if it did contravene privacy or confidentiality. What could happen is if we want to look at something like income as an input into purchasing power, then Statistics Canada could access the data, do the analysis, and spit out that indicator for us. And so we would still have the input into the index, but we wouldn't access that data directly.
Thank you.
Hi, thank you very much for your presentation. I'm Lucie Loignon, the CIO of Environment and Climate Change, and I have 2 questions, and I guess it's a request for clarification. And you mentioned that your objective is to develop a robust index, and then forgive me, I don't know exactly what's required fully in terms of developing the index. And then I see a challenge, the chicken and egg challenge. I heard you say that you required like good data, quality data to actually ingest and then to develop and test, I guess, the index. And then once the index is developed, then you will use the result in order to get more buy-in from the communities and from the department. So it's the chicken and egg type of thing. And then how do you plan to resolve that? And the other one is, like everybody knows that the remote community needs are actually, they're great. They're not great, but I mean, they're huge. And but the problem per se that you're defining, which tends to, like developing the needs index and then connect this with how it's going to be applied by government departments, by various programs to actually ensure better outcome. I don't see very well that connection. Maybe it ties to the granularity of some of the data as well, like what is the size of the problem that currently exists where like the allocation of Government Canada resources to those remote community is not, I guess, as good as it could be, and it would be improved by that index. So if you could clarify that, I would appreciate it. Thank you very much.
I can speak to this initially, and then Oana she's the policy expert, and she can fill in the gaps. But I believe our objective is the amalgamation. The first step would be the amalgamation of pre-existing data sets. And then there will, exactly as you said, the chicken and egg issue, where we would actually factor in consultation, where we would go back and forth with communities to confirm data available is in line with it's accurate, and it accurately reflects their individual situations. And again, like after the data sets existed, the existing data sets are factored in, we will be adding more data to make it a more fair solution. When it comes to adoption, we believe this would be a project that gets taken up by possibly Indigenous Services Canada or CERNAC, and through when the statistics are developed by Statistics Canada, and we have the cost recovery model for that, where we would be reaching out to a policy and a researching analyst that can confirm that our methodology is accurate and up to standards and how they usually develop these indexes. We would receive the data, we would develop the product, and then that product, like again, this development would be done possibly under Indigenous Services or CERNAC or even NRCan, depending on which organization wants to take this project forward. And then I believe within just the collaboration of Government of Canada, this product that's developed can then be used by teams across Government of Canada by public servants to apply to their micro projects of resource allocation.
Thank you.
So I'll just add on to that. I'll address your third question first in terms of the connection between the index and the outcomes. And I think, to me, like my inspiration when I did this work when I was at Nutrition North was really about an equitable allocation of funding, because a lot of times there's an interest in, we have shovel-ready projects, or we have like the loudest voices that are asking for funding. And I think we really need to think about equity, because sometimes the communities that need the most assistance are the ones that are, to a certain extent, hardest to see. So I think that's in my mind, the connection between the index and the outcomes. It's really pushing that equity approach to how funding is allocated. In terms of what's required to develop the index, like I'm not a statistician or an economist. I do social sciences, and I think to be rigorous, you need those disciplines to look at the index, to look at the methodology, to validate the data sources, to validate how data gaps are filled. Like that's what I mean by robustness, and that's the work that needs to get done. And absolutely, it is a chicken and egg, because you're going to have missing data, and you're going to try to fill those gaps as best you can, and you're going to show the value of what you can do with the information that you have, and hopefully that will incrementally improve data availability and quality over time.
Yes. Hello. If I can just add on just a little bit on the allocation piece, just connecting those pieces with how government departments can include the index. So for right now, different government agencies and departments have their own funding allocation methodology. So for some funding allocations, you're using a base amount, and base amount for like the provinces and territories, and usually the remainder of funding is distributed per capita basis. So using the most recent census as a determining piece of the population, and using the index can add on as an additional component to determine which areas need more funding. As we know, projects up north and in remote communities cost more, but generally with the allocation, most often those calculations are not included in the funding allocation, the additional cost of completing projects in remote areas. So I think the index will be useful to create that additional component.
Thank you.
Thanks. Derek Dobson from Microsoft. Thanks. What a fantastic presentation on a really important subject. So thank you. And you've chosen a really critical one that's not an easy one to solve, which is fantastic to have people like yourselves leading into. My mind goes to pretty much the same places as my fellow esteemed colleagues. And I'm taken by the challenges you'll face around potential discussions around subjectivity of data and data integrity itself. I think you mentioned the fact that even at the outset that there are different definitions of what is constituted or is declared to be a remote community that itself. And then there's the definition of the standard of living in Canada. How does that define in terms of absolute data itself? And then I'm kind of struck by the requirement to have integrity of data across the piece if some of it is based on opinion or feelings or need or consultation. And then the potential contestability of any allocation of funding, etc., based on the fact that the data itself it has that theme as it goes through. I think my fellow colleagues have spoken about this quite extensively, but would you want to comment further on data integrity and subjectivity and how that's dealt with so it's not contestable?
I think that's where we would rely on kind of data experts, and we would lean heavily on Statistics Canada, because again, it's a secondary analysis of data that is collected and analyzed by other entities. So the index is not trying to do like primary data collection. It's just bringing together data from many different sources and putting it together, hopefully to provide insight to guide policy and funding decisions. But there's, in parallel, this work that's underway right now, like for example, in the 2018 poverty strategy, ESDC committed to developing distinctions-based poverty metrics. And so potentially those could substitute for or be in addition to existing variables. So it's relying on experts who have done the work to collect the data and bring a data set into the index. And that the index is really just bringing in data from different sources together. And we hope that the data source is, it has integrity, it is complete, accurate, high quality, etc.
Yeah, just to add on to that, that's why we've considered the EC4 for the first year for period 0, as that we would require that individual for the entire year to work on the statistical and economic analysis. That somebody, would be employed by StatsCan and would be an expert in data collection. And StatsCan, being a world-renowned, statistics organization, has rigorous methodologies, that are validated throughout the organization from bottom up. So we would kind of rely on their expertise to ensure that the, data and the feedback we're getting from them is valid, so that we can, take that feedback and just produce the index, which is the data would be validated from the statistics experts.
Thank you.
All right, well, thank you very much for your presentation and excellent job answering the important questions that the judges posed. So thanks again, and we will be in touch. Have a good rest of your day.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.